TikTok, it's time to rock. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the British Electric Blues Show, also known as the 5150 Show. It's a pleasure to be here with you on a time slot that we don't normally do shows unless we have special guests. And ladies and gentlemen, we do have a special guest here for you today. If you are aware with the show card, we are going to be hanging out with a guy called Brody. If you just give me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just change the background there. Brody is going to tell you how him and I met. And it's one of the great things, isn't it, about social media, ladies and gentlemen. You can meet lots of people and share a lot of those things and passions that you have in life with people halfway around the world. It's a constant theme here on the channel. We just love the fact that we're talking to people all around the world. We've got some people here in the chat already. I'll make a point of making some shout outs to you guys. But if you just give me 2 seconds, I'm going to get this guy here in the chat. Please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for a warm welcome for Brody. Oh, brother, good to see you.
You too.
We've touched base a couple of times, ladies and gentlemen. Brody and I did a test a couple of days ago, and it's always a good thing to do when you're going to do a stream with somebody that hasn't been on your channel before. You know what we're about here. We like to pass on any lessons that we've learnt. And there was one thing too that I did too that you guys would be also happy about. I asked Brody, did I sound like Andrew? I didn't sound metallic-y, which is sometimes an issue that we have here on the channel when I'm playing through my modeling amps. And Brody said, man, you sound good. So thank you, Brody. Thank you for making sure that I sound okay.
Yeah, you sound great. And you have a great accent too. I sound terrible now compared to that.
Well, you know, proud Kiwi. And, you know, one of the great things, though, that we like to talk about on this channel, and, you know, I said it in my intro, Brody, you know, we've got friends here on the channel, a lot of friends from the States, you know, that watch us and help share our channel. A lot of people from the UK, obviously, a lot of Australians watching us. Brody, we have a lot of Brazilians, and here she is here now. This lady here, Teresa's in the chat from Brazil. She's shared our channel links to a lot of people in Brazil, and Brody, we've picked up a lot of subscribers from people sharing your links. So thank you, Teresa. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, wow. Hi, Teresa.
I'm going to do a quick shout out while we can. We've got 10 people watching us, Brody. So we've got Blues for Life. I know who this guy is. Thank you, Blues for Life. Thank you for saying that you're going to catch the replay. If you have any questions for Brody after the show, guys, put them in the comments. Brody will come back and answer anything that you guys have for him in the comments, I'm sure, over the next couple of days. But more importantly, he might even come back and answer those questions live. Another good friend of the channel, Greg Roberts, Tune, is in here. Thank you, brother. Thank you for joining us. Gretch Zeppelin, all the way from Canada, is in here. Good to see you, brother. Fast Eddie EVH, thank you, brother. And also another very good friend of the channel, John ZD351, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. So we have for you, Brody, an international audience watching you, brother.
Wow, I'm flattered. Just right here from Middle Tennessee, you know, I feel unworthy. Brazil, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah. Isn't it great though? Because you know, one of the positive things about social media, and again, I keep banging on about this, guys, and I'm sorry to bore the heck out of people, But again, when I was a young guy at high school talking about music and discovering music, the most important people, when you're on that musical journey, Brody, are your school friends, because you're talking about articles you read in guitar magazines. You remember those days, Brody? Guitar
Yeah.
magazines and radio interviews and shows and stuff like that. No YouTube.
Yeah, you couldn't. It wasn't all at your fingertips to say, I want to watch, whoever, talk about Jimmy Page. Just pick something. You were limited to whatever Guitar Player, Guitar World, and Guitar for the Practicing Musician had to say every month, and you had like 4 songs if you wanted to learn them with a tab in it, and that's what you learned because that's all that was there. And there was an element of that I miss, and especially when new records came out. Well, this is back when there were records too. So Tuesdays seemed to be the day they came out, and it was, the new Van Halen comes out here, or the new Clapton, or the new Aerosmith, or whatever. There was always a new record. Stevie Ray Vaughan, records. I remember Traveling Wilburys. I remember my dad telling me about that one. Hey, there's this super group. It's got so and so, and I remember going to Camelot Music with my dad to go buy the Traveling Wilburys, and that anticipation is gone on a lot of things. It's like songs drop, and even the way that sounds, they just drop. Nothing's released, nothing's sacred to hold in your hand and read the record credits to see who played on it, who wrote the song. Just where it was recorded, and some of the different notes, the liner notes. I spent hours, reading everything inside the liner notes on things.
And it's a constant theme of what we do here because, as you know, Brody, we do a weekly show where we rank every song on an album, that we pick. And the Rock Professor, one of my co-hosts, is always banging on about the event of sitting there with the album, with this and opening it up and reading and looking at the pictures and trying to decipher what's going on. That was all part of the process, that we had. But look, I agree with you. I think it's great that we can get nostalgic about these things. Walking into a record store and seeing these cardboard cutouts of Eddie Van Halen, or walking into a record store and seeing, like these big cutouts, of like Mick Jagger, advertising, the 50th anniversary of Exile on Main Street, trying to capture that, a few years ago, that kind of vibe, because you didn't know, because we didn't know everything back in the day. So, and also, I don't know about you, I had a couple of good contacts in some of my record stores too, that would keep you in the loop, that let you know what's coming, Brody, you know what I mean?
Yeah. We had some friends, it seemed like the cool kids in high school got there were 1 or 2 of them that worked at Camelot Music, or Waxy Maxie's, or whatever the record stores were. They were the ones, that they would tell you, and they would even let you in, when the store first opened, to come in and get, whatever you wanted to buy. So there was something really great about music store, even buying, like a music store, the mom and pop type music stores. I loved, going in and just seeing what the used gear was on the wall. And now it's so easy. You go on Reverb. So there's I don't know what you want to call it, a reverence for the procedure of it. In the past, you go in and the store's there and you see the guys and whatever, but there's also a great thing about, anything you could want to look for at your fingertips and pull up, 10 of the most bizarre piece of equipment you might be wanting to find.
Yeah. And look, I get that. And also, though, because, Brody and I, the Rock Professor and Brad and everybody that watches our shows too, we're also up with technology as well, Brody, too, obviously. On my phone here, I've got Spotify. I've got access, Brody, to albums that I could only dream of 30 years ago, Brody. Could you imagine that?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, as a kid, my parents had a a box. It was like kind of faux leather with a little, tab on the front of it that would hold 12 8-tracks, and it was sort of like they were on display in the car as if to say, this is who I am. Look at my 8-track collection, or look at my, then became cassettes or whatever. But it was, you left them open so people, when they got in, they could see, oh, they have Fleetwood Mac Rumors, they've got Hotel California, or they've got David Allan Coe or Skinnerd, or whatever it was. And it was sort of your way of saying, here's some of me.
Man, I'm glad you said that. Because I just had all these memories flooding back in my mind. When we had all of us, you had the 20 cassette holder, and that wasn't enough. Then you went and got the 40 cassette holder, and then you had 2 of those, and you had them in your car, and when your friends and your mates and whoever jumped in, it was a status symbol they would look through, and your level of coolness was measured by what cassettes you had. Then it went to CDs, and now when you jump in a car with Brody, you got to say, Brody, give me your phone. Why? I want to check your Spotify account.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to see what you've been listening to for the last 10 tracks.
Yeah. Well, here, full disclosure, I don't have a Spotify account. Like, that's how I sort of dig my heels in a little bit. I mean, I'll turn on like Pandora or something like that, but I'm still pretty old school. Like, I'll go buy the CD and then import it to iTunes and put it on I've got an old, iPhone that I use as my iPad, and it's literally got 500 CDs on it, and I always do the whole album. I still want to hear an album, not just one song and that's it.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that Brad, one of my co-hosts, says. I can jump into a car and you got a CD, you can skip any track. When you're listening to a record, and you're sitting down, Brody, back in the day, it was pretty hard to get up and lift the needle and skip, you didn't want to do that. I didn't. And so, you're kind of forced in a way.
And there's some songs to this day, I can still hear that, when it will go from one of the 4 sections on an 8-track tape.
Yeah.
There are still songs that I remember when it would jump. And one of them was Boston, I think, Long Time, Foreplay, Long Time, where in the middle of that little organ thing, you would hear it jump to the next track. I still remember that.
The power of music, bro. The power of music. And look, and that's one of the reasons why our channel exists, Brody. We get together. We love talking about music, albums, classic rock, British electric blues in particular. Eric Clapton, this guy here, Clapton, that guy there, big part of this channel, Brody. Big part of my life when I was a young guy growing up. So I'm, guys, we're going to ask Brody a couple of questions. We've got a couple of things, obviously, that we want to talk about. But I suppose for me, Brody, and I haven't heard any of your story. So, we connected through Clapton, through his Strats, through his gear in particular. Tell us how you discovered Clapton, please. That part of your story, the Clapton story. What got you into Clapton?
My dad, who was really, he played a lot of roles. One, he was my dad, and he was also like that cool uncle and the big brother. And the pal, like you're a mate, as if you guys would say. And I had a really, amazing relationship, with my dad. And he, we played in bands together. He played music. I still have a number of his guitars and gear and so on laying around here. But it was really him who got me into it. And he had, I think the first time I ever saw Clapton was the 1970, his first solo album, that came out. They had a picture of, he was playing like a big hollow body Gibson on the front of it.
I know the one.
Yeah, and I
Yep.
remember, I think "Let It Rain" was probably the first song that I heard on there, and then not long after it was the cut. And here's where it gets even more musical, but it was the cover of "Slow Hand."
Yeah.
Where it's got the neck of that
Yeah.
50s Strat and Blackie, and just it was iconic when you heard it and you looked at that cover at the same time. You're like, what? You're just mesmerized. At least I was, just
Me too.
mesmerized by it. And from there, I Cocaine and Layla, and to this day, I think Layla's still just the most powerful song I think I've ever heard. I mean, it's just
Oh,
every time gets me. That full, when it comes out, and so I'd go back and listen through all these records, and they were albums then, and Lay Down Sally, Cocaine, Tulsa Time. Then he started kind of going into that, bit of that country-ish things, and that
yep.
was really so. I first heard his solo stuff, and then
Yep.
and loved it, and then went back, and heard Cream and heard Blind Faith and Derek and the Dominoes, and even the Yardbirds, and I loved all the blues Yardbird stuff, but to be honest, I never heard this story until after I had listened to everything. But I remember buying the box set, the CD box set of Clapton Crossroads, the one with Ronnie Wood that did the
Yeah.
the drawing of him on the front of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've got like all my books and everything else around here too. But I remember, saying, okay, I want to listen through that one. Yep, there you go. And I wanted to sit down and really go back and listen to all that stuff. And I remember putting on "For Your Love," and I'm like, this doesn't sound at all like Clapton. So I sort
Correct.
of jumped around that one, and
Yeah.
but then when I heard the story of him going, we sold out, I'm out of here. I kind of
Yeah.
got it,
Yeah.
and anything blues related, I was just I was mesmerized. John Mayall, or his solo stuff or whatever. So it was I was probably um well I was probably like 5 or 6, when I first heard it, and just I he was everywhere, and continued to pop up, in solo stuff, and then I just that was a thing that made, with guitars laying around, that made me want to pick it up and play it, and try to learn those songs. So, and there were some other things too that Frampton Comes Alive, was a big record then.
Sure.
I love the band 38 Special. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but there's something about and all those Southern rock guys. There was
Oh.
something really, the Allman Brothers and stuff like that.
Oh.
But
Yeah. That live at the Fillmore Allman Brothers. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
It's a
But
masterpiece.
and the other thing too, there was just always something about, as a kid, my parents, they loved Clapton, and it was just a part of our family, whether it was the album cover laying at the turntable, or the tapes in the car or whatever. And at that point, 70s, 80s, my dad looked a lot like Eric Clapton. I mean, he looked a lot like, where even I told my mom I was born in March of 73, and I used to joke and say, I want to know where you were the summer of 72. I think a paternity test is in order, but my dad looks so much like,
Did you
you
see
know,
that comment there from Greg Roberts? He's saying
yeah,
that you look a bit like Clapton, to be honest, too. So,
yeah. I I get that sometimes, and it's a tricky thing too, because yeah, I do, and but I try to figure out how not to when I'm playing guitar, because then those are the guys I make fun of. I don't want
sure.
to. I don't want to. You don't want to look like an Elvis impersonator or something. But if there are resemblances, they're resemblances. You can't really, you can't change that. But
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things though about Clapton, I like the fact that you've said that Clapton like a lot of the great music that we follow, crosses generations. You know, that's one of the great things about it. You know, we're all Rolling Stones fans. Who isn't? You know, and
Yeah.
we've been watching the Rolling Stones for years, and we've been talking about it, and the Rolling Stones talk about it themselves. You know, Mick Jagger says, you know, I look out in the crowd and I'm seeing people in their 70s, and I'm seeing, you know, pre-teenagers, pre-teens in the audience. You know, he's playing in front of 3 generations, maybe even 4 generations of fans, Brody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that, that speaks volumes to the music. It's timeless. It still holds up. Even past the production, sounds different,
Yeah,
today than it did however many years ago. But this a song, music is not dairy. It doesn't
yeah,
expire. If
yeah.
a great song's a great song, it's always a great song.
Well, you look at these guys too; they're still touring. Look at Clapton. You know, you and I, we when we touched base a couple of days ago. You know, you just saw Clapton, didn't you, recently? So,
Yeah, about a year
yeah,
ago, September here in Nashville.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, and the guy's still touring. You know, even this year. So, what was that gig like?
Uh,
How,
he he was amazing. I mean, if you go as a well, one, if you go as a Clapton fan, you're going to be a bit skewed.
sure.
You're gonna love it, and you're gonna walk out and go, what didn't he play? And that's sort of your conversation back to the car of, oh, I didn't play Can't Find My Way Home, or didn't play um, Key to the Highway, or didn't play, Tulsa Time, or what. I mean, the list goes on, and then you realize, yeah, he's got that many songs.
Yeah,
That the 18 or so that he just played in there, you're like, wow, but that was good. When he went into this or went into that, and I mean, his dexterity, his vocals. I swear, the older he gets, the better. I mean, he was always a fantastic singer, I thought, but he's his just as a singer blows me away. I mean, his
yeah.
voice, um, he's very convincing. When he sings any kind of a song, there's a um, he's a there's something really convincing about it. In his voice, in the timbre of his voice, and the articulation and what he says. And so, but and his guitar, and I love the fact that he plugs a guitar straight into an amp, and he'll play that pretty much that same guitar all night. He'll hit the Leslie, or maybe the wah wah, and that's it. But there's something that's just, you're hearing his hands,
Well, on
and
this, it's interesting you should say that, because on this current tour, Premium Guitar did
the
a
rig
video
rundown.
on his rig rundown, and
Yeah,
he's just got a Fender amp. Everything's on 1 o'clock.
yeah,
And basically that's it, Brody.
yeah.
And then he's
Well, I
got his
think,
Strat. That's it.
yeah, the amps set. They were built. Those were, I want to say, they were Bandmasters, but
Yes, yes.
Dumble. Yeah,
Bandmasters. Yes,
I
yes.
think,
Yeah,
there were two there, and I think they were modified by Alexander Dumble,
yeah,
before he had passed, and they were all tweaked so that
yeah,
every knob should be set on 7.
yeah,
And then that was the way that he wanted it. And I think John Bollinger, was sort
yeah.
of joking around with the tech in that rig rundown, saying, well, your job's really easy, and all you got to do is turn it to 7 and make sure it's in tune. But and that was it. And he usually just puts it in the middle pickup position, and he'll do that little mid boost thing once in a while. But it is such just a pure, I love it. I love that kind of stuff.
Look, and I do too, and it's going back to this nostalgic thing that we were talking about at the top of the show. We like to talk about this. In fact, we did a show a couple of weeks ago, and the rock professor Simon, one of my co-hosts, reminded us about the gig that he did with. Again, it's a famous story, but we got to talk about it. He did a with Joe Bonamassa. So apparently he got the call up to go. So he just goes into a music shop, because he wasn't supposed to be playing. Comes out with a tweed, a Strat, and a
Yeah.
guitar lead. Turns up at the
Hmm.
Royal Albert Hall and plugs in.
Yeah. Is that the further on up the road?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What a great story. And I mean, that's the cool thing. You just grab a Strat, and I think it was a Daphne blue one,
That's
and
right.
plug it straight in, and it's just him, you know. And I think every player, you know, is like that. It doesn't matter what they play, they're going to sound like them. You know, I've got, you know, some really dear friends of mine. One guy, you know, real dear friend of mine, Pat Wolfkill. Those guys have a fantastic channel too that does a lot. I mean, they do deep dives into gear, and
Sure.
just my head wants to explode just trying to understand it. But it's really inspiring. But anyway, he and I played. Um, we met each other probably in 1991 or so in college, and just kind of quickly started to play. So it's been over 30 years, you know, that
Yeah.
we've done a lot of music stuff, you know, together, and we couldn't be more opposite in terms of gear and just even influence and everything else. But when you bring all that together, and I can play through his stuff and it's
Yeah.
still going to sound like me. You know, he
Wow.
plugs into my stuff, and to me it still sounds like him, you know, just really. And that's the fun part about all this. There's 101 ways to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when you
Yeah.
when you bring those, you know, a lot of those things together and you sort of blend them, you get this new thing, you
Yeah.
know. So
Well, what I like though, Brody, though, to be fair, and I think this is probably a good way for us to start talking about guitars and gear. Yeah, you know, the Clapton Strat. So when Clapton's turning up, ladies and gentlemen, with an amp and a Clapton Strat, that Clapton Stratocaster that he has is a dynamite instrument, isn't it, Brody? It's going to do things that a
mhm,
normal Stratocaster cannot do, Brody. And
right,
you can
yeah,
attest to that, can't you?
yeah. I mean, it looks like a Strat, but it's really, you really have to try to dial it in to make it a traditional Strat. I mean, you can, but it picks up from there and does a whole bunch of different things. And you know, one, it's almost like this with that TBX, that there's like this extra layer of articulation. It gets, you know, brighter. It gets more stratty if it's in the 2 or the 4 position. But I mean, it becomes uh, uh, just a fatter rock and roll, you know, machine when it's even just in the single coils, and then with that mid boost on it, it just gets, you know, it's like just unleashes fury, you know, out
Did
of it. But it's really versatile, you know, to do that. You can really um, cover all the bases with something. If it's a Tele, if it's a Strat, if it goes to a Les Paul or something like that, you that guitar, you can find your way. You can cover all those bases with it. You know,
so when you got your first Clapton Strat or played a Clapton Strat, did you go through that I get it moment when you put that mid boost on when you were playing through just an amp? Did you go this yeah?
yeah. Can I make fun of myself?
Please do.
Okay, all right. I've got, I've got plenty of material here. I got my first Strat, Clapton Strat, as a high school graduation present, and to this day, it was like the most, like, you know, when I got it, it was like when Clark Griswold finds his Christmas tree. You know, it's like just the lights come down, it comes up. But my grandmother got that guitar for me for my high school graduation, and at that time, I 24 Nights was out, Journeyman was out. There's
Oh,
all these like new videos that are coming, and it's like there's this thing when you see it, you know, with that pewter Strat, and I
oh,
knew they were coming out. I remember the first day I ever saw one in person. You know, it was a 7 Up green one hanging in a store called Keyboard World, ironically. But they were a Fender dealer, and I remember just staring at that, you know, through the glass at that guitar and going in, and they let me play it. And I never did really. I just picked it up and played it. I didn't mess with the tone knobs or anything like that. In fact, so I'd noodle with it a bit, but I was always so nervous. I didn't want to touch the one in the store. So I didn't know I was, and this, of course, that's like 88. So I got mine like 2 years later, when I graduated in 91, but the one I got serial number wise is in 89, but it was when the black ones came out. So my first one was
Sure.
black. And got the guitar, and I was so excited. Well, let me back up too. You know how the pickups were clear on those lace sensors?
Yes.
Or were flat white, not clear, but flat white. You couldn't see the poles in them.
Yes. Yes.
I at the time I had a Sunburst Strat, just a regular. It was a 68 reissue. It was a made in Japan 68 reissue with the big headstock, which
Yeah.
I never liked, but it was a Strat and I liked it, but I never cared for the big headstocks. But I
Okay.
had that, and I remember seeing those lace sensors. So I went to the same store, the same keyboard world, and asked the guy, "Can I get covers for my pickups to make it look like this? With the flat, the flat pickup covers on it." And he had no. He's like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" So I'm thinking those pickups were just a cover to make it look sleek or something. I didn't know. I didn't even know it was a lace sensor. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So he orders in covers. They came. Must have ordered 3 different kinds, and they all came in with the pole pieces exposed on them. And I said that I don't even know what to ask for anymore. So that's how I was chasing that look. I was chasing that story. So I get this black Strat. Fast forward to spring of 1991. We go to a music store, Victor Litt's Music in Maryland, and I didn't know I was doing. My dad, my parents, and my grandmother. We go down and we go there, and it's there. And I had never seen a black one before. They were
Yeah.
green, red, and pewter when they first came out.
Yeah.
So I see this black one, and it's like, wow, this is really good. And they said, it's yours. And it's like I just blacked out for some time. I couldn't even wrap my head around that. So got it. And then the same night, this was, around high school graduation and stuff. And I'd said earlier that, I'd played in bands with my dad. Well, we had a music thing that night where some of the dads of kids in our class and me and another friend of mine who had graduated, we had put some songs together and we were going to play it at our graduation party. So here I had this Strat and I was going to take it in and play it like this brand new Strat. And I'm going to play this guitar. So I go in and I plug it in and I'm trying. So literally went from the store home to change and then into the school to play this thing. And I turned the volume up, I turned both of the tone knobs up, just thinking they were the tone knobs. I didn't even know what the mid boost did then. So I'm like, why does this sound so, what's wrong with this? Why does it sound so distorted? Is there something wrong with the amp? Is there something wrong with the what? So I'm thinking something's wrong here. And I didn't understand what it was. So I start fooling around with the knobs and I for whatever reason, grabbed that bottom tone and just rolled it back. And I thought, well, that sounds better, So I thought, and I knew it had a 9-volt battery in it. So I thought, well, maybe the battery's dead or something. So anyway, I turned that down, played, through the thing, and then went home. And after that, a few days, really messed with it and read the little card, that came on the knob in the case. Like, oh, that's a boost. That's not a tone knob. So I mean, it was so stupid, but it makes for a fun story now. Yeah.
Look, I appreciate the fact that you've been honest, but I've seen similar experiences with guys too. You've got together and you have a jam, and you give someone your guitar and you say you have a bit of a fiddle, and it's like what's going on here, because they're not used to that mid boost, or they've had no experience with it. Because like guys, I've got to tell you in the chat, if you haven't played a guitar with a mid boost, you can buy them. You can aftermarket put them into your guitars. If you've got a good luthier, you've got to route out for a 9-volt battery. But that's certainly one experience. Go to a guitar shop and try one, because that's 25 decibels of boost, Brody.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
as you
and
know,
it's got a fun set. It works as a boost, but it also works on its way to boosting. It's like it's a fattener and then it's a boost, because you can go from a real traditional Strat sound, and you just roll that up just a hair, and all of a sudden you're in sort of Gibson land, or
yep,
something that's
yep.
you can play those fatter, big chords or power chords, and it covers a little more sonic territory that way.
Yeah, and one of the good things about music DVDs and videos, guys, we've got the Cream Reunion tour, which is a perfect example. If you listen to that, but also if you visualize and watch it, you can see Clapton. But more importantly, I think the Winwood Clapton concert that they did in 2008. If you watch that, that's just about one of the most perfect photographed videos of Clapton playing, and you can see clearly, Brody, can't you, what he's doing, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can pick up the tone differences. If you're not aware, just watch what he's doing with that bottom knob, and then you can
Hmm.
hear it, and you go, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, he'll reach down and grab that, and then even uh, pretty much anytime he plays Layla, the full electric version, you hear him, he'll noodle and hit that D minor, and then you hear it swell. When he
Oh,
does that, especially that video they did right just before his first guitar auction, the one at
yeah,
that one, that's the one. I love the scene in there because he breaks into it and does that, and you can see Nathan East like right
yeah.
behind him when they break into it, and then and the whole place erupts, and Nathan East is just like jumping back, and he gets this huge grin on his face. But that was right after he did that. So I love that moment, and it's just so bang, that song. It's a powerhouse.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I agree with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for participating with us. We got 10 people watching live. We had 13 there for a while there, Brody. So we always appreciate you guys hanging out with us. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you, if you're watching on a replay, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. And at the end of this video, if you are watching and you want to get in touch with Brody, if you want to see what Brody's doing, I'll attach Brody's social media links to this video too, so that you can reach out and connect with Brody and see what he's doing, especially on Facebook. Brody, this is the best part, I suppose, of the show. So, before we get you to talk about gear, you've given us a bit of a background on how you discovered and came across Clapton, and the relationship, obviously, with your dad, which always is an important. Isn't it interesting how it's always, if it's not a dad, it's an uncle, or a cousin that pulls you into rock and roll. So
Mm.
so just give us a little bit more of a background into your musical journey before we talk about gear, please.
Okay. Like I said earlier, there were guitars in my house. My dad played. He played in bands and stuff. So I was always around it. And even as a little, 2-year-old, I still have it over here. But you know how every little kid has a um, favorite toy, or their
Yeah.
go-to or whatever. Well, mine was a ukulele. I was this little kid. My mom got it from somewhere. So when I was, this little kid, my comfort thing was this ukulele, and I drug it around all the time. So and again, my dad had played, and my mom used to love to tell a story. Um, my dad had it was an early 70s 12-string Ovation balladeer.
Wow.
I still have it. But he would, kept it in the case and would keep it locked, because I was, 3, 4 years old, and just I knew they were around, and I was always looking for them. So there was they keep it under their bed, and she'd tell a story that she watched me walk into their bedroom, find the key, pull it out, and try to get it unlocked, and So finally, and this was several minutes, finally she said, I got it unlocked, opened all the latches, opened it up, and it was like, oh God. And then they came in and said, no, you can't touch that. And apparently I cried, hysterically. But so they were always around. And then, my I could pick them up, I could play them, and I would just noodle around with them. There was an electric guitar, the Ovation was there, and I'd pick them up, and I'd try to hear different things. And then my dad could show me how to play, some of the little riffs, and, Smoke on the Water and La Bamba, and little things that you start to get that dexterity. So I probably got real serious about it when I was, 9 or 10. And, Van Halen, of course, Clapton, and there was just some of everything at the time. The Eagles, I've always been a huge Eagles and especially a Joe Walsh fan.
Sure.
So I would, that's all I did, was play. And then finally I was probably, 12, 13 years old, and I would start to play at, different functions, with like our youth group growing up. And I would learn
Sure.
how to play a lot of songs. So that was a place that I was the kid with the guitar, and I could come in and play, and the leaders, would see that and let me come in and play along and stuff. And so at that point I start, 14, 15, you get some buddies with you, and you learn, like 3 songs or 2 songs, and you play them for 4 hours, just over and over and over. And there was one, a real good friend of mine from high school. He was the drummer, and I was a guitar player, and we would every Friday and Saturday we would go to his house because his drum kit was there, and we would just play until, everything just sort of rang in your ears. And then we go out and turn on MTV's Headbangers Ball,
Yeah.
and watch that's when MTV actually played music videos back then.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so kind of, so I did that. And then got into, some kids at school, knew some of their parent, this one guy played in a kind of a local cover band. And he called me up and said, hey, my daughter, goes to high school with you guys, and said you play guitar. Our band needs a guitar player. So I'm like 15 years old or something. And they were doing some country, some classic rock, some different stuff like that. So, and of course here I'm 15, he said, and each gig, it'll pay at least $50 a gig. I'm like, wow. So I get to be in a band, learn these songs, play them out, and get $50 every time. So the first thing I start doing is, well, 3 gigs I could buy this, 4 gigs I could buy. So there starts my, gear acquisition syndrome. And and then it never really stopped. So that was through high school. And then we had, put a little band together, and we, with some guys, and we start to write some of our own songs and play that. And it was fun, kind of going around the community and doing that. But it really got, I'd say, on I don't know what you want to call it, like going to college, literally in college, from like high school to college. And I met, a handful of really amazing people in college that
Sure.
sort of took that all to a new level. And we're all still pals to this day and get together and play. And, we made some records, and really did more, I think, than any of us had ever anticipated doing. Like, we never thought we'd actually make a record, or never thought we'd, run into some of the folks that we have, or encounter people down here, and especially in Nashville. But there were, 2 people in particular, and I mentioned the one earlier. His name's Patrick Wolfkill, and I met him, at college through a mutual friend of ours, who's, the other guy. He was a upperclassman bass player named Larry Lakey, who's one of the most, one of the greatest humans to walk the planet, and a
Awesome.
monster bass player. And
Wow.
so I'm moving in freshman weekend, and this guy comes over and he says, hey, do you play guitar? Yeah. So somehow he's scouting out, the freshmen coming in playing guitar, because I learned this afterwards. His friends, who includes, my friend Patrick, had sort of graduated off, and he needed a new circle of people. He was right in between, the
Yeah,
ages.
yeah,
So he starts putting this together. So that encounter was like the connection of influence that I never would have had. And a lot of it, is Patrick. I mean,
wow,
he knew he could play, Pat Metheny and Eric Johnson and, you know, the Police. I mean, he was into this stuff that was so, to me, much more difficult than the stuff that I was playing, and
yeah,
he knew about all these pedals and he knew about all these different sounds. And I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. And my friend Larry said, well, let's play some songs with him. So we get together, and I'm just trying not to embarrass myself, because
sure,
I'm the young guy, quite different from that. And his bass playing was really kind of on that whole level too. And I'm thinking I'm just more of just a straight ahead rock guy here trying to
yeah,
fit in with all this complex stuff.
yeah,
But it worked. I mean, well, first and foremost, we were all pals,
sure,
and really just loved being around each other. And from there, it was like, how do you, and no egos. That was the best thing about this thing. We were all there to learn from each other and just hang out. And it was never in fact, I remember my friend Pat and I literally having, robust dialogue of, no, you play the solo, no, you play it, no, you play it. And it was, we'd get to a point where we just say, no, that fits your style, better. And so, really in college, we were playing, on campus, and we would do student events. And, when we probably should have been doing homework more than anything else, we'd get together almost daily with, especially the guys that were still in college, and play or be working on something. And then out of school, that band, sort of just continued. And over the last 30 years, just made 4 records, one year we actually played 72 shows in one year.
wow,
And but never, I was never going to go, try to go for it, professionally. One, because I have no risk tolerance, but two, I was always, in the back of my mind, I always knew there's somebody always so much better. So I never gave, I never, settled in my mind that I was good enough to make a shot at it anyway. So I just never did that. But I was always afraid of, if I took it too seriously, or if I tried to make it, something like a job or something, I never wanted to be soured on my passion for it.
yeah,
And because I'd seen a number of people do that, where they go for it, they were all in, and they wanted to make it, and
yeah,
whatever that meant didn't happen, they would literally quit. And I was always afraid of that too. So for me, it's, whether I'm practicing for something specific, or just after dinner coming up here in I call it my man cave, and
yep,
just unwind, noodling with something, or, just trying to learn something I've always wanted to learn. There's always that place to go that's like, you look forward to it, and
th- I, I'm amazed actually with your story, because there's a lot of similarities from some of the other guests that we've had on, about how music's been this constant, especially when you're young, and you're going through that process of getting educated and working out where you want to be. And one of the great cements in your life, Brody, is music. And that's certainly been a factor for me as well, keeping that creativity within a group of people and guys that you trust. It's a safety valve as well. And I love hearing that, because if you didn't have that creativity and that environment when you were at college or whatever, well, you could have been doing other things. But you already said, well, maybe I should have studied more. But the point is, I think that music creativity and background that you have actually enhances what you do academically anyway. So there is a solid relationship there. And I know that from a lot of guys that I've met over the years. A lot of the clever guys that I've met have been guys that have been involved in music.
yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to go on record and say that, you know. So that's a great thing about music.
Yeah, and music is music, but if you translate it academically, it's like it teaches you creativity. And
Sure.
even accountants need to be creative sometimes. It just gives you it helps your brain try to figure out, different things. And
Also
don't get me wrong.
discipline. Also
Yeah,
discipline. You know, you've
yeah,
got to turn
yeah,
up on time if you're in a gig with guys, you know, or girls. You know, interpersonal relationships too, because you might have a really really good lead singer. Like all parts of our life and business, for example, you gotta be together as a team. You can't get on with everybody, Brody. So that's always a good place to learn sport and playing in bands. Okay, I don't like the
hmm
guitar. I don't like the guitar player. I don't get on with him as much as I do with the rest of these guys. But gosh,
yeah,
he's good. You know what I mean?
mhm. Yeah, and and I make with because I mean it's not like I was worried about failing college. I was always the nerdy guy too. That
Sure.
I was the nerdy guy even, and after that I even went back to grad school. So that's
Yeah.
that's how nerdy I am and risk averse. It's like I wanted the sure thing in terms of a
Yeah.
career or something that was more solid. But there's so many similarities. Being in a band teaches a lot of life lessons,
Uh huh.
a lot of them. It teaches you family dynamics. It
Yep.
teaches you how to work as a team. It teaches you how to recognize talents in people that you may not particularly care for, but you learn from, and you figure out how to make a collective thing work. Whether they're on your Christmas card list or not. I mean, you just you figure out different personalities. You learn how to deal with um, rascals, people that you may not like, but you figure out sometimes how to feed their ego to get, for the greater good. Let them think they're the greatest thing in the world, and more often than not, there's at least one ego in a band that you've got to. It's the landmine in the band, and everybody knows it, but you just try not to step on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's even better when there are no landmines in a band. That becomes a safe place and a fun place. And just and I mentioned my friends Pat and Larry. The last number of years we get together, usually in around Summer NAMM here in Nashville, and
Yeah.
come down and we'll spend 4 or 5 days or whatever, and we say, all right, let's get together and play music. And the last two times we got together, we hardly played anything. We're just catching up. And I mean, we come up here and sit around, and there's a whole wall of guitars here and amps, and so we come up here and we're in the elements, in the environment, and you just sometimes we'll pick up something and do it, but other times we're just catching up, just
Yeah.
reminiscing, and some music playing in the background or whatever. But it's a lot of stuff that even this past summer, here's how significant that relationship was. Larry's oldest daughter got married up in Maine, and he wanted my friend Pat and I to play in the wedding, and that was one of the most special things I've ever done. So we played in the wedding, and then his other daughter sang a song in the wedding. So here we are. It's like, here's the next generation of this, and here are these people that didn't even exist when we all became pals, and we're going to concerts and playing and things like that. So it's I don't know. It's bigger than music.
Yeah. A very good friend of the channel, Nelson Rodriguez, is making some really, really cool comments. So I think this is the part of the show he's saying, look, I see a constant look in his room. Nice. Are we seeing just a small portion of his amps? Show us some of the goodies behind you when you get a chance. That's, Nelson, why we're here. Trust me, brother. Obviously, we're here to hear a little bit about Brody's backstory, because that's what we do here. But this is the good part of the show, where Brody is going to show us some of his guitars, in particular his Clapton Strats. Brody's going to come back, don't worry, on another show. So don't worry, he's not going to get through everything. But he's got some strats there that he's gonna show and tell. And this is the part where I'm going to present Brody. And if you guys have any questions about the gear or whatever, this is your time. So Brody, what have you got? What do you want to talk to us about first, brother?
Well, if we're going to keep all things Clapton Fender Stratocasters, let's start where it all began. This is Blackie number one. This is number one.
Wow.
You know, the one that I got, and you can, hopefully you can still, see it on there. It's in remarkably good shape.
Wow.
And there's one ding in it that one of my roommates from college did, and neither one will fess up to it. But it's it's aged just so, and I'm really particular about them and meticulous with it. But I don't know if you can see just how dark that neck got too over the years. I mean, that was pretty white. I've got one here that I can show you that's, when that maple's new, it's really bright. But I actually stopped playing this a few years ago because I was some of the frets were needing to, for whatever reason. I'm not hard on guitars. The frets don't. I don't put a lot of grooves or anything in them. But after 30 years of playing this thing, obviously you start getting like the D chord grooves in here, and the one up here when you're doing your F's and C's and stuff like that. So I didn't want to have to ever refret it, so I stopped taking it out and playing it, but I always kept it at home and played it. But I took it and had a fret job on. I actually got it plecked at Glazer Instruments here in Nashville. And it's butter. I mean, this is one of the easiest playing guitars I've ever had in my whole life. And
wow.
And here's another interesting thing too. On every Clapton Strat, I have never once put the whammy bar in, not once. So it's,
wow.
I mean, even the plastic on it, there's some, rubs and stuff on the paint, but there's nothing through the paint or anything. And this is the serial number SE, and then it starts with a 9, but an 89. And this one, of course, a lot of tarnish on the bridge, but this is the number one, and the V, I don't know how you show it, but there's something about that V profile, on these that it just lays in your hand,
Yep.
But and again, the thing that to actually early on where it says Blackie under it, I remember when I saw that, I thought, I don't know if I like that or not. I just liked it where it had the signature. But this was the first year that they made him black, because I think at first Clapton said he didn't want to, black was black, and let's let that go. I don't want to I guess that was too close, where if he's going to do something different, let's pick these other three colors, and two of a lot of the stuff that he would do are all car, big car guy too. So that red, Torino red, was a Ferrari color, I believe. And then the other, the pewter, I can't remember if it was a Ferrari or a Mercedes or something. There, that pewter, which is the one for me. I mean, pewter, that's so iconic, and then the other one, I've heard a number of different stories on how this one, has come about, but the other one, it's like, well, just, they said, what about another color? And I think it was a, kind of a nonchalant comment of, what about a green, like on that 7-Up can, and then that was this. And just into at first, I didn't know what and this is the first color I saw, the one at that store, and I didn't know what to think of it at first, and there were some early photos of I think a Saturday Night Live performance where he's got like a green shirt, a purple jacket, and playing one of these where it almost looked like the Joker, from but there was something really, really cool about this color to me too. So I and you can't see it on there, but there's a lot of really great like metal flake and
Yep.
stuff in it. So, and this is one of the newest ones that I got, and it was from a really great guy on Reverb not that long ago, because I'm always looking for the I don't know why. I mean, I don't think they're any different, but I like the first years of
Sure.
the SE8, the 88 when they first came out. I always wanted, I'm always just looking for crazy clean early serial numbers. And I've seen some that are, just crazy as far as price, where you're just like, well, that guy's out of his mind. But it's interesting to watch. But then you get people that love these guitars, and when they find somebody else who loves them, all of a sudden they just want to make sure it goes to a good home. And now you have a
Sure.
conversation about, because they don't play, or they got it from somebody else, but they weren't a fan of it, but they knew what that guitar meant to that person. So, a few months ago, I got this, found a guy on Reverb, and it's an 88, and he really understated the condition, of the guitar. He's like, it's good. He said, I don't want to promise you too much. So he sent me a few detailed photos, and I said, that's really clean, so he's trying to talk it down, and here I am wanting to get a good price, and I'm telling him how great it is. And but he was just a sweet guy. And long story short, I said, well, how about, and he was already in a fair range. And I thought, somebody else is going to jump in here and grab this. But so I was, texting with him one night, and at my son's baseball game, actually. And
Yep.
I said, how about, whatever shipped, insured, everything. He said, perfect. So it shows up, he strung it down, to take the tension off of it. And he was really like, I did this, and I packed this in there. And he did. I mean, it was the best packing job of any guitar I've ever had.
Yeah.
And it showed up, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. I mean, there's not even tarnish on the bridge, from where your hand would lay. The tuners are all still really, super like new. But then the serial number, SE8, and then it's lower. So this was the last of the first year. Now I've got one of every color of the first year Clapton Strats, and there's just something about, well, one, they were that was basically the beginning of the custom shop. When the first year or two when they made those, they were what is now known as the custom shop to
Yep.
some extent. So, that's the green one. And I wouldn't take these out now. There's a part of me that said I would never just buy guitars to collect. But that doesn't mean I'd drag them out and play somewhere either. I mean, so if I have them here at home, I play them. In fact, it's sort of like having a car or a motorcycle or something. The worst thing you can do is let it sit.
Yeah.
Pick it up and play it. Keep it fresh. Keep it going. And, here's another first year. This is the Torino Red. And again, that's really, really clean. And one of the things that I really loved about these was there's a sleekness to it. And I remember on the video that you and Brad did, where
Yep.
you were talking about those guitars. You guys were talking about the pick guard, and it's like, that thin, just plain looking. It looks, cheap, or it looks, just not whatever. And yeah, you're right. But that's what a 50s Strat is. And the other thing too is I could never bring myself to drill a hole in anything to change it. But so I'm always trying to make sure they're kept nice so that the pick guards don't roll up, because they are just single ply. But I think when they're white like that, there's just a sleek look to them. There's the color of the guitar.
Yep.
It's white and chrome and a maple neck, and there's something
I've got a good friend of mine that's got a couple of them, and he's got the Blackie too, and they do look nice. So on my pewter though, that single pit guard just it warped over time.
Yeah.
You know, like there was like an inch gap between the scratch plate and the so you know I put the 3-ply on, but you know, look, I agree with you. That single ply pick guard makes it look different because you don't have that black that you do on the 3-ply. So
Yeah.
if people aren't aware of that, if you want to just hold that up again while we're talking about that, please, Brody, so that people on the replay can just have a. So if you just notice that, see, it's just a single one-piece white ply pickup. And if you've got Stratocasters at home, you'll notice probably that, or a Telecaster, that you've probably got a 3-ply. You'll notice there'll be white, black, and white on the edge, machined out with a CNC. But as Brody just mentioned, because that's replicated off his Blackie, which was a 57, Brody? 57 Strat?
Primarily, but I think it was made out of 3 different Strats.
Yeah.
And I think all basically from the same era, but I think most of that guitar was a 57. So, you know, and a fun story about this one, this was another, you know, like the green one, it was another, you know, guy who was, you know, a few years older and just selling the guitar. And I found it, you know, on Reverb, reached out to the guy and asked him a few, you know, questions that I always ask about. Is it all original? Is the wooden block, you know, still in here? And a lot of times they wouldn't even know, you know, they never took the back of it off, which worried me too, because I thought, is there battery corrosion in here? Because that's where that 9-volt battery lays. And I thought, well, if that battery's in there and it's like gooed all over everything, that's going to be something to clean up. But he wasn't sure, so he took it off, and you know the everything was fine in there. He said, "Yeah, the wooden block's still there." And I said, "What? That's kind of a big deal." And everything was original. He was just, you know, real upfront. Like, I'm the second owner. You know, I got it from Rumble Street Music in New York, and he lived in Connecticut. So, you know, he was going to ship it, and we ended up, I, you know, told him how much I love these things. And then we got onto, you know, another story too, where I told him about my kids, you know, when they were born, each year, a year they were born, you know, my daughter got a pink Fender Stratocaster, and, you know, my sons, I got them, you know, each blue Stratocasters from the year they were born. And none of them play guitar, but I always thought it would have been a cool thing. And I have them, but so I was telling them about that, and, you know, and my love of these Clapton Strats. And I asked, you know, obviously asked them for the serial number. And this one is really, really low. It's like it's 540. So, you know, we get the deal. He ships it. It shows up, and it was like the green one. You know, the case is perfect.
Yep.
All the, you know, the tags in it that I remember getting with my black one were there. The little one that hung on the volume pot, you know, the TBX and the boost and the booklet and everything that talk about the lace sensors. So I got with him when it showed up, and I'm like, this is fantastic. You know, thank you so much. And he said, do you want to hear a story about that guitar? I'm like, oh no. Oh no, you know, what's going to happen? And that's just the pessimist in me. I thought, all right, there's something that I'm about to get blindsided here by something. But then, you know, right away I thought, no, there's no way this guy would do that. He said, I can't verify this. He said, but I'm going to send you a note, you know, that I got from a guy at Rumble Street Music on it. He said, with a really high percentage of probability, Joe Bonamassa owned this guitar. So, you know, and at that point, I love the stories, but I wouldn't have paid for that. You know, it was like, to me, with the irony, Joe, you know, I love him, love watching him play. I love him keeping the blues alive. I love him keeping, you know, the passion for vintage instruments, you know, where it is. I mean, just an unbelievable guy. So, and there's always a joke about every guitar was owned by Joe Bonamassa at some point, you know, which is, I don't know why guys hate on him. I think I love everything that he does. And, but anyway, it was a note from a guy at at Rumble Street, basically saying that this came in as part of a collection from Joe Bonamassa. I guess he brought in, a number of them and swapped them on, probably one of many 59 bursts or something. But at some point, and he was a huge Clapton fan too, so I could totally see him wanting one of these when they came out. And then all of a sudden, I was like, well, I'm not really, So I have the letter and the email from the guy at Rumble Seat about this one. But again, to me, it's just a really early model, red Strat. And I actually sent him on his, Instagram a note, saying, hey, I have this guitar, and I had no idea if he'd respond or not. I haven't heard back, but I always thought it would be fun if he would write back and say, yeah, I remember that, because if he owned it, I bet he remembers it. Like, yeah, I got that when, Journeyman came out and I was 13 and I wanted to learn how to play No Alibis, or, I'm sure he's got some story like that. But the other one, here is, to me, the holy grail of Clapton Strats. This is an 88, and, picked this up from a guy who bought it as an investment, and never played it. It even had, the plastic was still on the pick guard, whenever he brought it to me. In fact, the plastic's still on the back piece, but I'm afraid to take it off because I don't want it to, I don't know what it's done over the years, on it. Yeah. So I'm just going to leave it there. But the thing about this, one, it's great. It's got the V, like everything else. You can set these up that if you closed your eyes, you can make them all be really, really similar. But this one has got a ridiculously low serial number on it.
Oh, what is it? Holy moly. It's a 96?
No, 88.
What is it?
It's 800088. It's the 88th one made.
Oh my gosh. Okay, 88. Okay, all right. I'm blind as a bat. That's exactly what it says.
So I've seen two other ones that were earlier. There's one out there right now on Reverb that's like serial number, I want to say 26 or 29 or something. It's a 7-Up green, but it's he's pretty proud of the price on it. It looks great, and then there was another one I saw a few years ago that was number 7, but I mean it was some astronomical number that the guy wanted for it, and that's where it's no fun if you're paying that to get them from people who know what they are and to know that they're going to a good home. Because even that gray one, I still have the original shipping box from Fender for it, and I have it. I just keep it up in the rafters in my garage, but I have all that stuff there. So
this is amazing, Brody. From my perspective, I just think it's fantastic. I'm going to take this conversation down this path, and we have to. We buy guitars, ladies and gentlemen, for a lot of reasons. We buy guitars because we want to play them. We buy them because they look cool. We buy them because, like Brady was saying before, there is this investment aspect behind the motivation as well. And I certainly have done that as well. In a limited capacity, I bought a 91 Strat Plus, and they're only ever going up in price. Yeah. But the point that I want to make here, Brody, is we love Van Halen on this channel. We've done a lot of Van Halen shows, and we saw this especially with the Music Man guitars, with the Ernie Ball Music Man guitars, when Eddie passed away. Within 2 months, Brody, the prices of the Ernie Ball Music Man guitars went up 3-4 times because Eddie had passed away by virtue of that. So the point that I want to make is, these guitars are worth so much today. At some point, Brody, they're going to be worth 4 or 5 times as much.
Yeah, and and that factors in, where I look at
Yep.
it, I'm like, well, these do a whole lot better than my 401k in the last 2 years, and and I've always tried to, buy them right,
Yeah.
and to never buy something that I know is going to go down in value. But
Yep.
everything, that I would ever, get over the years is stuff that there is an investment aspect to it, and that helps make it okay for me. And and I even keep a list, that if, in the case something, were ever to happen to me, there, two or three people my wife could, get a hold of, and they'd help understand what this stuff is. Because I don't really have anything vintage. Those guys, that's a whole different, the boutique stuff and the vintage stuff that frightens me. And
Uh,
that's where you can, you buy
yeah.
some, you know, boutique custom built thing, and to you might pay that, but you're probably not going to get your money back out of it. Versus
Correct.
something that you don't anticipate being collectible, but someday it is. And I I don't get them for this reason, but at some point, I mean, I think anything, you hate to think of it, but I mean, all these guys are getting well into their 70s, and they're not they're mortals. So, at some point they won't be here. And
Correct.
to your point on those Ernie Ball, the Music Man guitars, I mean, yeah, you're right. All of a sudden, Eddie passes and you see him for like 10 grand on reverb.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, they've sort of come down a bit, but I mean, they're still, five, six, $7,000. And, and there's a part of me that hates that, and it's, you want them to, regardless of whether you get rid of it or not, there's that's a keepsake of something that inspired you, and it reminded you of periods in your life. It inspired you to play. It inspired you to to do something with it. So every time you see it, your mind, you have all these thoughts of where you were, what you did, what made you want to get it in the first place. And it to me, it'll always be about that. When I see those guitars, I think of, you're just overwhelmed with, 24 nights and Journeyman, and the when that guitar came out, and it almost being like Ralphie, in the Christmas Story when he wants that Red Ryder BB gun.
Yep.
It's like that was me with those Stratocasters when they came out. And
Oh, same here, and we love talking about that. Brody, I just want to do a quick shout out. We've got Boner Jams in the chat, very good friend of the channel, and also Janice Lala, another very, very good friend of the channel. She did some work for us when we were streaming live from EVH Con a couple of days ago. She picked up the broadcast for us and gave us an opportunity so that the channel could continue streaming that. Thank you, Janice. And we also have in the chat as well, that's popped in, another good friend of the channel, Dan from New Jersey is here. And he says that Clapton was probably the biggest influence in the 70s for guitar. And, what was certainly up there, 100%. But that Slow Hand album that Brody mentioned earlier at the top of the show, with the iconic, I've got the album. Give me a second if you guys aren't familiar with this, especially people on the replay. Just give me a second because it's important to have a look at what we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, and John ZD 351, but value only counts if you're going to sell them. Exactly right. And I have no intentions of selling. I'd be down to one kidney before I would part ways with some of these guitars,
So that's the album cover, guys, that Brody's talking about.
Yeah.
With the iconic Stratocaster, and then if you open it up, there's Clapton there. Yeah. How many times didn't we sit back and look at this over the years?
Yeah. And I remember drawing pictures of it. In school, I would draw. Everything was red with white stripes on it, or I'd Van Halenize everything, or draw, the covers of my books, the inside of my lockers, everything. I would draw pictures of that headstock, and there was just something that got me. And in fact, the first electric guitar that I mentioned, that was around my house. In fact, let me grab it. This is a fun.
Yes, please do. Hey guys, thank you for hanging out with us and joining us, and share our social media links on your social media links, and we'll do the same thing for you. If you want to be on our channels page, if you're watching, let me know, send me a message, and we'll put your channel on our channels page. If you guys are doing anything on social media, let us know. We'll promote you.
Okay, this guitar, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called a micro frets.
No.
They were made from like 1967 until 1973 or 4, something like that. But they were built in Frederick, Maryland, and I think probably Mark Farner of Grand Funk was probably the most well-known guy that played them. But they were really kind of obscure guitars. But
yeah.
my dad had this. And so you see how the headstock is shaped like it is.
Yeah.
I would always, like at home, I would turn it backwards because it looked more like a Strat that way. Like the little thing. And because I thought that looks goofy, it doesn't look like a Strat. But I would, if I was just sitting, watching TV, I'd have a guitar in my lap, and I would hold this one, and I would have it so that was pointed down, and I would always picture it being a Stratocaster. So, but this is a cool guitar, all by itself. But that's how drawn I was to the lines, of a Strat and that headstock, which is also probably in part why I don't like the big headstock either. There was something, when you get that in your mind, that's what you have. And I'm like that too with I love motorcycles, and
yep.
I'm that way with Harleys.
Yep.
When you get the lines of an engine of a certain era
yep.
in your head, nothing else looks like it, and that's the one that you want. So
yeah, I'm not a big headstock fan either. One of the co-hosts on the channel, Brad, he's a big Hendrix nut, so he's got a couple of Strats, with the big headstock. And look, I get it, Brody. You either like the big headstocks or you don't. I bought an American Special about 10 years ago, and didn't keep it for long. The pickups were nice, Brody. It had Texas Specials in it, but it just had that big headstock, Brody. Didn't like it.
Yeah. And it's, and that's the great thing. I love hearing about guys that love 70 Strats and people that love gear that you don't. Yep. But it does the same thing for them that your gear does for you. And that's the fun part of all of it, and especially as I've gotten older, because when I was younger, if I ever met my younger self, I'd probably want to punch myself in the throat. But just from being, I'd go in, I'm like, nah, why would you do that? I was born a grumpy old man or something. But you learn to watch what people do and understand that you're all headed for the same place. You're all headed for some way of channeling what inspires you, or channeling what you love, or sharing it, with somebody. So it's, again, learning creativity. There are so many different ways to solve problems. I'll give you, I don't know if you guys probably see like this little pile of pedals back here, if you can see those or not, but there's some more, and then some over there. But forever and ever and ever, to me, pedals, you had a left and a right. You didn't, there was never anything, guitar wise. But again, the friend I keep mentioning, Patrick, him and a friend of his, Pat and Jason, have a show called PJ and the Beard, and they do deep dives into all kinds of gear. But it really started with pedals. So I'm sitting there and I'm understanding the difference of a tube screamer versus a Zen drive versus a direct drive versus you name it. I mean, and there are a bajillion, different ones out there. So I started to kind of, King of Tones and things like that, and Klons and all that. And I actually started to jump into that, where I'd pick a few things up, and you can see behind me, I've got a couple of Blackface, deluxe reverb and a Princeton reverb, and they're they're not in my wheelhouse. In fact, forever and ever and ever, as much as nobody's got bragging rights, these PV Classic series, and I've got a number of them on the floor too, a 20-watt combo and a 30-watt combo, which is really where it all started. But these are 30-watt heads with EL84 tubes in them, and a 410 and a 15. So I've got like 2 stacks of those. But forever and ever, since mid 90s, and before that, I had I still have it too, is a 5150 head that super gainy. And but I was playing those, so I always played with the dirt from the amp, and would ride the volume knob to clean up a little bit, or to do that. But I got to the point where that was it, and it was like, well, that works, and I want to do that all the time. And then all of a sudden, I thought, I want to give something else a shot. I want to understand. I may not ever do it, like build a big pedal board, or go to a clean amp and, a pedal platform amp, or whatever. But I wanted to understand it. And it's so much fun. I mean, it's like you get it now. And
Yep.
I never would have before. But almost everything at home, I'm sitting here rehearsing for something. I'll grab one of these, and you just, put a dirt pedal into a one of these Blackface Fenders, because that's also really the way, you show up to a gig, especially around here, around Nashville. One, there aren't bands really anymore, but you show up, and the most common gig is, every Sunday morning, every musician's playing somewhere at a church. That's
Sure.
just like one of the regular gigs, and a lot of them are playing the night before down on Broadway. But it's that ability to it's the ability to just, you walk in and you don't take your amps anymore. I mean, I remember lugging a half stack around, and even sometimes 2 cabinets, because you had them, and it's like, well, this looks cool, so I'm going to have, have a Marshall head in this. But anymore, it's less is more, and you're going to plug into whatever amp is there. But understanding, how to work some of the, the pedals and the dirt and stuff has been a really easy way. You throw a distortion pedal in your gig bag with a guitar, and now all of a sudden you can plug into whatever's there and know how to dial it up. So
Okay.
that's been a fun thing.
I just want to do a shout out to PJ and the Beard. PJ and the Beard. I've
Ah,
just subscribed to your channel, PJ. So everybody here that's watching, if you guys can find PJ and the Beard, I'll attach PJ and the Beard's link, ladies and gentlemen, to this video. So if you're watching on a replay, please go and subscribe to PJ and the Beard. Brody's going to be back on the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about some of his gear. He's going to be a very good friend of the channel. He's going to hang out with us. He's going to do some more
thank
videos.
you.
But Brody, can you? I'm going to isolate you, and if you can talk about those amps, because I've just noticed a couple of people in the chat during the course that we've been live were curious, and I know that those 2 Tweed ones, you and I were talking about them a couple of days ago. So if you can just tell us a little bit about those
Sure.
amps,
Sure.
everyone would be grateful.
Back in, I can't remember what, exactly what year it was, but it was early 2000, maybe 2012 or something like that. For a few years, 2 or 3 years, they made a run of Eric Clapton signature series amplifiers, and there are 3. There's the Vibro Champ, which is basically a champ, a Tweed champ, but it's also got tremolo on it. It's it started as a Tweed champ, but then there's it's like this throbbiness on the tremolo that's a lot of fun. But basically, that's the Layla sound. You turn that
Oh,
thing all the way up, and that's that sound. That's what
wow.
Duane Allman was playing on that record. That's what Clapton was playing on that record. And it's a thing. When you really drive these things to, you get them hot, turn them all the way up. It's just unbelievable. So that was, one. And then here's the middle one, which is basically a Tweed Deluxe,
Mm-hmm.
but it also has he wanted the tremolo in it. So it's they call it the Tremolux. So
Yes.
it's basically a Tweed Deluxe with tremolo in it, the Champ, and then the other one that I don't have, and I keep certain. Again, this is part of the hunt, but they call it a Twinilux, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically it's the 40-watt Tweed Twin, and it does a couple of things. One, they all have attenuators on them, or the Tremolux does. The Champ, but this one, it's got a tremolo or attenuator where you can bring it down to like half power and still be able to turn it up. But on the Twin, you can do that. You can turn off one of the speakers. It's just and that's what he was playing for so long. Even like the Cream reunion, it was those Twins that were the thing. But a, a, a Twin is about as practical as a half stack. A lot of times. And
Yeah.
anyhow, so when they came out, the prices were crazy. I thought, there's no way I'm gonna. That's craziness, to spend that kind of money on an amp. But also, this was my wheelhouse forever and ever, and I was used to finding some of my favorite sounds for $300. So I couldn't wrap my head around spending many times that for something really and I had never been a Fender amp guy. I never kind of went there. I was Marshalls, and I had that Marshalls and Peavies were
Yes.
were always my thing. And again, with the Peavies early on, because of I talked a little bit earlier about the Southern rock guys that I really liked, like 38 Special and Skinnerd, excuse me, and they were all playing PV Mace amps from back then. And then when these then Eddie Van Halen comes out with the 5150, and now all of a sudden you can get that sound too. I just grew up loving PV equipment, and I know it's got no street cred, as the kids would say, but to me it always worked great. It was again a bit nostalgic. Now the logo, the is my friend Pat refers to it. He calls it the
Yeah.
Barney Rubble logo. With the and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I get it. So all like the cabinets, you take them off, but I would go and have the classic 30 or something like this, and everybody thought it was a Fender Tweed. Whether it was a Bassman with the 410s or a little deluxe on those. But it's what I got used to. And then on the I had that 5150 that was
Yep.
also a gift. My
Yep.
dad bought me that for my birthday when I was in college, and I to this day that was a big deal. That was a really big deal. And but I got that at the time. Obviously when who didn't love Van Halen in every era, but especially that late 80s and early 90s era, just loved Van Halen, and even now. But I never realized this until I don't know a few years ago, I guess, when I was thumbing through the catalogs of the Christie's auctions where he sold the gear to raise money for the Antigua Crossroads Rehabilitation Center. And you're flipping through, and there was this one setup that sold with the Soldano, the SL 0100s
Yep.
amps on there that he was playing at the Albert Hall, in
With
that
the
Journeyman
with the
24 nights
Bradshaws, with the Bradshaw
era.
effects.
Yeah, with the
Effects. Yeah.
Bradshaw rig.
Yep.
So I'm in, this Van Halen place and loving that, but also always playing Clapton stuff. And at the time, it's like, I didn't realize that those Soldanos, he's playing really high gain amps during
Yes.
that era. And here I am with this 5150. And it's like, well, this still sounds like Clapton, but
Yes.
it never dawned on me that he was playing those Soldanos. That's really similar, voicing to those high gain 5150s.
I
So
I was fortunate enough a couple of months ago to pick up a 5150 combo. I'd been searching 15 years for one.
mhm.
I picked one up. I got a very, very good price for it. It's at work. Brody, it is loud.
Yeah,
I've got a blue.
it is loud.
Man, I've got a Marshall Blues Breaker, and I thought that was loud. But these PV 5150s, my gosh.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's true what everyone says about them too. Boy, they are heavy. It's every article, everything that you've read and heard about those combos. My gosh. But
yeah.
yeah, look, I agree with you. When I got it, I took my Clapton Strat to work, and also the just give me a second.
Hmm.
This thing, an Eventide multi-pitch delay to get the OU812 sound. My gosh, and I played that opening riff of No Alibis through it. You're right,
Yeah.
Brody. That high gain Soldano. And I'm sitting there, and I've got a couple of my work colleagues, and we're grinning. This is,
Yeah. It's but again, that's the last tool that you would think of to use, for that kind of a sound. But it really comes down to whoever the player is. It's going to sound like them.
Yeah, well, look, at the end of the day, there's a very good friend of the channel, a guy called Steve Rosen, who came out with a book a couple of months ago called Tone Chaser. It's his biography on Eddie Van Halen. This is the card there, Tone Chaser. He describes Eddie Van Halen as being a tone chaser. Aren't we all? Aren't we all, Brody, to some
Mhm.
degree or another?
Yeah. You hear a sound in your head, and you spend the rest of your life trying to get it out of your head and make it audible.
Yeah. So this album here, Journeyman, when it came out in '89, No Alibis, Pretending, Bad Love, and ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that these songs were on the radio. They were radio songs. This was considered popular music, Brody. But here, it was on the top 10. I remember going, there was nothing like that guitar tone on the radio at that time when when this album came out. Just fascinating.
Yeah, and it was, that was the heyday of super strats and, big plumy hair and dive bomb, everybody trying to play what Eddie Van Halen was. Everybody's doing their own take on Van Halen, which was awesome. I mean, he changed it. I mean, when Running with the Devil played for the first time, when that was the first thing anybody heard out of Van, game changer. It's like, what is that? And so everybody wanted to be him and do that. And there was, these were the 80s. But the fact that, Clapton was on like his third or fourth version of himself, of coming back, that Journeyman thing, because he had done, a few movie soundtracks, like It's in the Way That You Use It, and, kind of Forever Man, where he was still, he was being pop music, he was still Eric Clapton, and just playing what inspired him. I think I want to say it was Mark Knopfler that turned him on to the Soldanos, and he's like,
heard,
oh, okay,
yes, yeah,
okay.
From what
So
I've heard,
and he wanted to get those, and apparently Mike Soldano was backlogged for a long, long time. But when he heard that Eric Clapton wanted to some of them, he did to the front of the line, but those ended up being the two amps that from that era. But again, it's you're with your pals, you're with your mates, and they use something that inspires you. So try that. I want to do this, or I want, and I don't know how many examples of that from some of my friends, a Mesa, Boogie Mark IV, because my friend Pat had one, and vice versa. Those guys, the PJ and the Beard guys,
Yes.
they're like, yeah, we love these classic 30s, so it's just so much fun to do that. And, so you have a conversation with somebody and they tell you what's inspiring them. And it makes you want to go do that. Yeah. I was going to say that before you accuse me, that was one of the first real blues songs you would hear on the radio, when they would play that.
Yep.
Even though he played it, back in his early days, that was a great song on that record too. And Hound Dog and Lead Me On was on that record too. I love that song.
Yeah, it took a guy in an Armani suit, ladies and gentlemen, to come on stage, and release an album to get to get that kind of tone, high gain tone with his Stratocaster that the plumy head guys were trying to get. It took a guy in an Armani suit, Brady, to do it.
Yeah. Well, he just outclassed everybody. I mean, these guys are wearing Richard Simmons' leftover spandex on stage and using their girlfriend's hairspray and lipstick and stuff. And, and don't get me wrong, that was fun. I mean, one of my guilty pleasures, I love Motley Crue. I never get that. I love some of that stuff, but he comes out and it's like, he's still Eric Clapton, just his presence. And then you put an Armani suit on him, this gear that's on a whole different level that isn't fluorescent with a point on it anywhere. It was just like, all right, I'm going to outplay you and outclass you. I don't need to do all of this. I'm going to play the notes that are needed, and I'm going to play them better than anybody else could do it.
Yeah.
So
and he certainly did it. There's a very good friend of our channel. He's an American as well. He's based in New York. His name is Michael also. He's been on the channel with us a couple of times. When I get a moment, Brody, later this evening, I'll send you an article that he did. He interviewed the engineer of 24 Nights, and we've done a show with Michael also on here talking about that. The interview that Michael did with the guy, I forget the name of the engineer, forgive me, but it's a fascinating article. But Brody, we haven't ranked. Just give me 2 seconds, please, ladies and gentlemen. We haven't ranked this album yet. When we do, we'd love to get you on, Brody, as a guest host with us when we rank this album.
Me and Mr. Johnson.
Yeah. It won't be this year because we're running out of time, but it'll probably be end of January. We'll keep you in touch. We'll keep you in the loop. But if you want to join us while we go through and talk about each track on this album, rank the tracks from, we'd love to have you on.
I'd love to.
And we'll get Michael on there as well.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I remember going to the mall to buy that CD when it came out. So every single one.
Look, and another good friend of the channel here, Hugh Caldwell. He's been on a show with us too. Lace Sensor Stratocaster pickups and that Soldano. I agree with you, Hugh. It's a standout era for me. Standout, one of his top 3 eras.
Well, and here, I don't know if you want to take a look at another one. Speaking of lace sensors, but
wow,
if you can't tell, this is a different shade of green. This isn't the 7-Up. And what happened? This was originally a 7-Up green Strat, but the band that I play, and it's an '89. So it picked it up. Actually, my wife and my parents got it for me. A number of people kicked in and got it for me at Christmas, and this was my second Clapton Strat. But I took it. We were playing, at a weekend retreat up in Pennsylvania, and the band trailer It was icy. We were going out towards Pittsburgh, and long story short, the band trailer went out and kissed a tree, and I mean, the trailer didn't fare well, but the only two pieces of gear that got damaged was this guitar, and I have just a mid 80s double cut Les Paul Jr. with a P90 in it, and the headstock and the heel, for whatever reason, those got broken on it, and then this guitar took a shot and just cracked. It's probably three pieces, together, and it just split. So I didn't know what to do. Well, first I just had to stop wanting to throw up every time I thought about it. But I'm trying to figure out what do I do with this thing? What's happening? And we got some insurance money, and at that point I went out and found this is a pewter Clapton, but it's got the noiseless pickups in it.
Oh, the Fender noiseless. Yep.
Which I also like both of them, really. I mean, they are a bit different, but long story short, I ended up with this one. I went and I got another body, just bought a body off of eBay or something, took it, routed, under this thing, there's a circuit board.
Yep.
Routed it and routed for the battery in here. Mm-hmm. And just put a different body on it and kept the same guitar. But I kept the broken body and for 10 years and just, never did anything with it. So I'm going to say a year and a half or so ago, I took it to, there's a guitar shop here and a guitar builder down here just outside of Nashville. I took it to them, and it was all still painted. It just was split here and split here. And I said, could you repair the body, glue it, and then refinish it in this 7-Up green? Fender wouldn't do it. I tried to find a number of places, and even though it'd be a refin, I didn't care. I wanted it to be, what it was, because I change strings. I don't modify anything. I'm not a pickup changer. I'm not I might put a bone nut and saddle or something like that on it, but I can't alter things like that. So I wanted this to be painted the same color. But I went in, he said, yeah, I'll match it. I'll take care of it. We tried a couple things and it just it never came out. So he said, I'll get it as close as I can. And this is what it came out like, which I like it. It's not 7-Up green, but I still like it. And people sort of look at that like, is that Sherwood green? Is that the Caribbean mist? Is it 7-Up green? It's like all of the, colors that Fender's made over the years. It's sort of like that. So this one, it lived through a big break, but it's still a great one. And then, so I get, questions about that one too, that people want to know. And then I don't know how we're doing on time, but we have two more if you want to see them.
Yes, please. Yeah. Please do, Brody.
So anyway, I showed the pewter one that I got with, the insurance, settlement from that. And that became one of my favorite ones. That's still one of the go-tos. It's a champ, and probably the more subtle V of any of the ones that I have, but it's an 05, I think. Okay. Remember how I said earlier, when our kids were born, I bought my oldest daughter a shell pink Stratocaster, and my son, who was born in 06, I got him it's called Chrome Blue. It was an American standard, and that was really the only blue one they made. And then in 2010, when our youngest son was born, I wanted to get him a blue Strat. Sure. Well, there wasn't a nice blue Strat available. The only ones, I think, the only production guitars were two different shades of blue Clapton Strats, or three. There's a midnight blue, and then there's this Mercedes blue. And then that same year, they made the special run of the Daphne blue.
Uh-huh.
And so I ended up finding, on from an, an international dealer, found this guitar and ended up, it was at the right place at the right time. And you can see how white that neck still is, compared to the other
Yeah.
ones. And there's
Yeah.
something about, I love vintage guitars and how they feel, but there's something about a brand new Strat like this that just feels just as good as an old worn in guitar. So,
Hmm.
the look of them, there's something about the frets on them that it just looks nice. It looks fresh. And
Beautiful.
so anyway, I got this one, for him. And then it wasn't long after, my conversations with that guy on the Mercedes Blue
Yep.
Strat. I told him, I said, I'm buying this for my son who was, born in 2010. And he said, well, I've got another one here if you're interested. And I thought, So he had one of the Daphne Blue ones.
Oh.
And I don't think he understood how, that this was, on the back on the custom shop. This is like
Yeah.
a different thing. I mean, this was a special run of them that they did. They did them in Daphne Blue, and it was a different. They did a different gray color that same year that I don't remember if it was a Ferrari or a Porsche color, but it was like a darker. It was pewter, but darker. And they did, a limited run of those. Well, the guy had one, and I got it for a whole lot less than I should have for it. So I thought, well, I'll give one to Max, who was born that year. I said, and maybe I'll keep one. So I don't really take them out and play them. I play them at home, and they sound so good, and they feel.
Yeah.
This one's got the most exaggerated V of any of them.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's great. It feels a bit skinnier, but and that's the thing. It's when I pick up a Strat like that, I want a V. I want that feel. But if I pick up a Gibson, I want a big neck. And it's just, I don't know why, but that's just what it is.
So are the custom shop V's sharper, do you think, than the standard Claptons? Is that something that's consistent, or is that just unique?
I don't think so. I mean, I've not played a lot of that. I might have played 4 or 5. I have 2, but I haven't played many more than that. But the Mercedes Blue one feels like all the other ones. But this one, it's just got it's almost like the V's the same, but on the outside, it's not as rounded. It's like it's shaved more. It's thinner, which I think is what makes the V feel more pronounced. So
Awesome.
I think it's just this one is a little different than the others, and it may be because, and I mean, people know this better than I do, but it may be because these are really the ones that are hand built, whether it's team built or whatever. I don't know what this one was, but this does have this is as much man as machine that built it. So I think that might be part of the part of the thing with it. But the grain in this one is really, really fantastic too. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just, they all have kind of a different grain to them that's really great. We just want to stare at them.
Brody, they're beautiful guitars, and I'm just sitting here captivated by looking at them. A very good friend of ours has just joined the chat. His name is Crappy Luxury. He's a British Electric Blues nut as well. He's a Clapton nut. He's got a couple of questions here, so we'll just maybe offer an opinion on these questions before we wind up the show. But I'm going to throw the first one up there. He's saying one thing about the EC Strats that he's noticed on every model that he's looked at, the high E string is so close to the edge of the fretboard. I don't see how it can be played. I've never noticed that, Crappy, and I've had 2 of them. Brody, do you have an opinion?
No, I've not noticed that, um, ex except on one. Actually, that gray, this one. I'd said I'd played this one for so long. No, in general, no. They've
Okay.
all. To me, the action is so low. It's like they're effortless, which it's a struggle to play slide on them. They're that
Yeah.
low. I would typically not play slide on any of these, but with this one, a couple of years ago, I picked it up and I'm like, it just doesn't feel right, and I realized that the string, on the high E, wasn't
Yeah.
parallel to the edge of the neck,
Ah.
and so I took it down to the shop here to Glazier's, and I showed it to the guy. He goes, "Oh, yeah, that happens." He literally takes the guitar, holds the neck, and does one of these, and just aligned it again. He said sometimes
Damn.
that neck just in the pocket over time moves.
Really?
So
So
yeah,
he just really?
wiggled it back and snugged it up. That was it. He said sometimes they do that, and and
Wow.
and I was, I'm taking this all over the place. I was flying with it, and it's in really, really perfect shape, except for a little, sweat on that. This thing is like brand new. But yeah, I mean, and I've never had any other guitar do that. But with this one, he's like, yeah, that's kind of common with Fenders, with bolt-on necks, especially with Tellys and Strats. He said sometimes you just have to. What did he say? Sometimes you just have to persuade it, and you just shove it
Oh,
back and snug it up. But so I wonder if because when it happened, that's how I noticed that it was off the side, but then it straightened right back up. So
what I
it,
noticed on this Strat here once a couple of years ago when I restrung it, I took all the strings off and I restrung it, and I noticed there was just something wrong, Brody, when I was playing, and I had a look and I saw that all the saddles, the individual saddles on the bridge were just off a little bit. You could see that they weren't going straight through to the hole, in the center, if
yeah,
you know what I mean. So
yeah,
so I unloosened all the strings
hmm
and just had to and just pushed them up maybe a millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters, and then
yeah,
restrung it. Yeah,
yeah. If you get those loose, I mean that there's one pivot point here, and then there are two little set screws that if they I mean these all will shuffle around if there's no string on them. So
yeah.
yeah, that
So
can.
I restring each string individually now. I don't take all the strings off. I restring
Mhm.
all my strats now, individual. Each without. Yeah, because I don't want those saddles, Brody, to move.
Yeah, yeah, and especially on a Gretsch, I really would never take all the strings off at one time. But so no,
Beautiful.
in general, I hope that answered the question. But maybe just look at the neck and the body. I That was the
Yeah,
first time I'd ever heard of that. So
yeah. Me too. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have Brody. And I told you, Brody, 2 hours will go quick. I told you, brother.
you're right. You're right. Yeah.
We could sit here for another. So we made a deal together, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're watching on the replay, we said, look, we would never rush the first show. And like a lot of things, we're all busy in life, and we've got a few things going on. If you want Brody to come back and do one more show with us before Christmas, let us know, and we'll book him in, because I know that he's busy as well. We've all got lives to lead, and what we want to do is we want to sort of help people as well with their social media things. So, like I said, guys, I'll attach Brody's and if that's okay with you, Brody, if you want me to do
Oh
that,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then
Sure.
people when they're watching can reach out and touch base with you, I should say. And also I'll make sure that PJ and the Beard, friends of yours, I'll attach their YouTube channel to our communities page. I'm going to do the same thing for Janice. Any projects, Brody, you've got that you're working on that are coming up that you want to take advantage of our channel to get the word out, please just give me a yell. We'll do that. If there's anything that you're doing, take advantage of social media, because it's there, and like I say, it would be an honor for us to do that for you. If you got anything coming up, let us know.
Sure. Thank you so much. And again, I'm just, as you guys would say, just a normal bloke, not a not a rock star, not any, so I my story is my story, and I hope I didn't bore people, and I hope we, dove into the, guitars as much as you wanted, but there's always, more to have on there. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope, for the fact checkers, I hope all the things that I, referenced, if I missed something, or if I'm not correct in something that I'd said about, the history, I always want to make sure I'm right on that stuff, because someday I always had the hopes of, when I'm retired, maybe I can become an Eric Clapton historian or something, and and we could do I've got a whole rack of books here with core programs, rare magazines, and, all the VHS tapes and, booklets and stuff. I've got a lot of unique things that are fun to collect over the years too, of Clapton memorabilia.
Well, we'd love to do, you and I and our co-hosts will talk about doing something, even if you want to come on and do something semi-regular with us next year to talk about your Clapton memorabilia. You got to do it with people who are Clapton nuts, and I'm one of them. Man, I can sit and talk about Eric Clapton for 3 or 4 hours. We've got some great comments in the chat. Dan of New Jersey saying, Brody, excellent guest. Hope to see him soon. Holly Lewis saying the same thing. Janice is saying that she only popped in for a few minutes and she stayed.
Thanks so much.
Hugh is saying the same thing. Brody, I just want to tell you one little thing that we like to remind people about too, with YouTube. So you mentioned that you want to, in your capacity as a fan, become a historian and tell your story about Clapton. You've already participated in doing that on other social media platforms and here as well. Because when we're long gone and people are doing histories of artists, they're going to take advantage of organic fans like you and I and everybody else in the chat, and they're going to say in 2022, Brody Hutchins made this point, and that's a reality. True, we believe that people are going to be using, what fans are saying on social media as a reference point, long after we're gone. So we kinda as fans, when we go public and go live, have a responsibility to that.
Yeah. And in academia, they would refer to us as subject matter experts on Eric Clapton.
You've got it, absolutely. Yeah. And look, we've got a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks. We'll get Brody on, I promise you guys, ladies and gentlemen, for another show before Christmas, and we might even do something semi-regular with Brody. So let me know in the comments if this is something that you want us to do. Let me know what you think about the show, and we look forward to getting Brody on again. Thank you for hanging out with us, Brody. I'm going to give you the last word, and then I'm going to cruise. All right.
Thank you, Andrew, and everybody who's been on. Thank you so much for listening, and the kind words and the great comments. It's the camaraderie is priceless. Thank you so much.
And I have to say something. I know Clive 54 well, and we get that comment. Brody is God. We get it.
Yeah, we just need a dog urinating on that, and then that'll be
don't go anywhere, Brody. I'm going to play the video and go, but don't leave yet, please.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back, ladies and gentlemen, in about 7 hours' time with the Rock Professor and Brad. We're going to be ranking the tracks. Black Sabbath's first album with Ronnie James Dio, Heaven and Hell, came out in 1980. Brad picked that album. We're going to be ranking the tracks, so join us if you want to hear what we think about that album with Ronnie James Dio. Come back and join us. Bye.